Once upon a time, the jazz club was a mythic place that signified urban romance, free-loving hipsterism, and the Dionysian rites of the exotic black man. In short, the dread possibility of ecstasy. As a survivor of many nights in actual jazz clubs, I can testify that the image was only partly correct. Like most of the finer things in life, jazz is an acquired taste. As a suburban youth, I would often ride the bus up the New Jersey Turnpike through the industrial wasteland that must be crossed before the island of Manhattan is won. The combined sum of several weeks' allowance would be burning a hole in my pocket. After docking at the dependably sinister Port Authority terminal, I'd take the AA train to Waverly Place in the West Village, which by then had pretty much completed its transformation from Bohemia into Bohemia Land. Tourists nursed espressos at the Café WOR and the Café Bazaar. At Figaro's coffee shop on Bleecker and McDougal, I'd order a burger and listen to my heart pound as I watched the exquisite, joyless waitresses slink around the room in black leotards. An epigraph on the menu read, "Where the beat meet the elite." By the early 60s, jazz, having already been displaced as America's dance music of choice by rock and roll, was facing another crisis. College kids, after a brief flirtation with bop and cool jazz, had chosen folk music as their official enthusiasm. Unlike gnarly post-Barker jazz, guitar-based roots music was totally accessible and irony-free, and almost anyone could play it in some form. Moreover, the leftist anthems of the Depression were easily adapted to become the official music of the early civil rights movement. New clubs featuring Dylan, the Terriers, Judy Collins, Richie Havens, and the like were pulling in a huge share of the business. Nevertheless, the Village was still the best place to hear jazz in its last glorious incarnation. At the Village Vanguard, my distress at being the youngest person in the audience would dissolve as soon as the music started. In the early 60s, God stood on that tiny stage. A lot of them drank J&B and smoked Luckies, but they were gods just the same. Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, and John Coltrane were still youngish, fearless, and working at the summit of their creativity. The proprietor, Max Gordon, once he got to know my face, used to seat me at the banquette next to the drum kit and give me a flat bar Coke. The cover charge was like $7. One of my favorites was bassist-composer Charles Mingus, who'd always bring along his demonic drummer, Danny Richmond. Every time Richmond started banging out that triple time, the vibration of his sizzle cymbal would move my glass towards the edge of the table, and I'd have to push it back to the center. I remember Mingus halting a tune in mid-gallop to lecture us on race, politics, cheating record companies, and hypocrisy, both black and white. Watching this tempestuous artist at work, I found the extra musical events just as exciting as the music. I have to admit cringing, though, when Mingus, on one of his rougher nights, started screaming Uncle Tom at old Coleman Hawkins, who was sitting at the bar. Hawk just gave him a world-weary smile and took another swig. Once, when I complimented pianist Jackie Byard after a set, he actually sat down at my table and graciously answered some questions about the music. As the premier club in New York at that time, the Vanguard attracted a crowd that was a mix of serious fans and tourists. Of course, there would always be the young preppy in a blazer sitting with his date, attractive in a little black dress. Imagine a split screen. On the left, the kid's eyes are wide, his face is flushed, he's transfixed. He can't believe he's finally in a real jazz club 12 feet away from the great John Coltrane, who's blowing up a hurricane. His date, on the right side of the screen, is in hell. Although she's heard her boyfriend talk about jazz, this is her first real exposure. She's been in this tiny, smoky, smelly room for almost an hour now, nursing screwdrivers and being forced to listen to four Negroes create a din that sounds like nothing imagined on God's earth. She's got her head and her hands down on the table because it hurts, a real pounder behind the eyes. Most humiliating is the fact that her boyfriend has forsaken her for a black man who seems to be using a silver horn as a satanic instrument of masturbation. The two sides of the screen merge when she finally pulls on her date's arm and demands